Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So we are continuing with our hearing, study, discussion of Sri Brahma-samhita. Last week, as I just said, we completed verse 37, which has the longest purport in the book. We've come to verse 38. This is one of the more well-known verses of Sri Brahma-samhita, and there's a very important principle that is discussed here. Important and beautiful principle of realization in Krishna consciousness. So we're here in verse 38. I'll chant this verse. It's one of my favorite, and often quoted by our gurus. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achincha guna swarupam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The sadhus, their eyes tinted with the unguent of love, see within their hearts that Shama Sundar Krishna of inconceivable qualities, that primeval Lord Govinda do I adore. So this is a very, very important point, that we can perceive the Lord, truly perceive the Lord through devotion, through the eyes of love. He will only reveal himself to us through the medium of love and affection. Otherwise, what need does he have? He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone, right? So the only via media is mercy, love, affection. So premanjana charita bhakti vilochan. This salve, our translator here chose an uncommon word, unguent. I don't even know how to pronounce that, but elsewhere we see translated like a salve, that is put on the eyes and that is giving us vision. So we can read this purport. The form of Shama Sundar is Krishna's inconceivable, simultaneously personal and impersonal, paradoxical form. The sadhus, or pure devotees, see him within their own hearts in their trance of devotion, bhakti samadhi. The sham form is not the sham or black color of this world, but it is the color of the transcendental variegatedness that bestows eternal joy. It cannot be seen with mundane eyes. Bhakti yogena manasi samyak pranihite male apashya purusham purnam, etc. This is a verse from Bhagavatam. If we study the nature of the pure samadhi of Vyasadeva, we will appreciate that the intrinsic form of Sri Krishna is the whole personality of Godhead, and he appears seated in the inner region of his devotee's heart of devotional trance. So this verse, our Gurudev, I heard our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, quote it several times, and it appears in an interesting context in Srimad Bhagavatam. After Srila Vyasadeva, right, he's mentioned here, he receives instruction from Narada on, giving the seed idea of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he gives these, there's this Chatur Shloki, right, of Bhagavatam. We just went through the Chatur Shloki of Bhagavad Gita. There's also a Chatur Shloki of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4 principal verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Narada gives these to Vyasadeva, and there are also some verses of chastisement where he's correcting him on everything that he'd previously presented in the Vedic literature. And then Vyasadeva is taking that instruction within his heart and meditating, how do I proceed from here? But it's not just an intellectual, it's not just an intellectual consideration. right? That he's making, but with devotion, with heart, with this mood of surrender, dedication, he's contemplating the instructions of his guru, and through that medium of sharanagati, really, of surrender, devotion, the clear, more clarity, more guidance, more revelation descends into his heart as to how he can proceed in a more specific way, right? So it's a very significant point, right? And so this verse, bhakti yogena manasi, like linking, the language is very interesting. Right here, yoga, right? Like linking, bhakti yoga, linking manasi, his mind, through devotion, then everything came to him. So it's a very it's an important point that is made here. And also very hopeful, right? That in a practical sense, that think of Vyasadeva, right? He had a task. He had a very important task to enlighten humanity at large. It's not a small job. So as we may become overwhelmed at times, right, by our various seva tasks, so think of the level of responsibility that Vyasadeva had on his shoulders. We think we've got it tough, So this is the solution, right? That everything comes from above. We are just vessels, right? We are just instruments. And so receiving his guru's instructions, his guru's guidance in his heart, meditating on them in a mood of surrender and devotion, and then waiting to receive what will come from above, what revelation will come. This is the process. At the time of his appearance in Braja, everyone, both devotees and non-devotees, saw him directly, but only the devotees adored him. Krishna of the holy place of Braja, as the priceless jewel of their hearts. This was something our Gurudev also mentioned, because someone asked him this question once, like, when Krishna was here in this world, then, like, did everybody see him? What did they see? It's an interesting point, right? And so our Gurudev, he answered that the general people who weren't qualified, they saw, he used this word Maya Krishna, like some illusory form of Krishna. To actually perceive this original Krishna of Vrindavan, you must have eyes of devotion. That is the only way. There's also this point, I'm trying to remember, our Gurudev makes this point with the example in Mahabharata, right? When I believe it's who is it Dhritarashtra? Maybe someone here can, maybe Giridhar Prabhu or maybe Jayadev can remember better the details. But our Gurudev, he mentioned this example a few times, how right, Dhritarashtra is blind, right? And he heard about this, this universal form. We've just come to this chapter in Bhagavad Gita, actually, chapter 11, universal form. And Dhritarashtra, he had some desire to see that. And he asked Krishna something like, oh, can you remove my blindness for a moment so can you give me some revelation of that form? And Krishna gave some explanation. It's not a question of like you having like mundane vision to see. Simply, if I want you to see, then you'll be able to see. It's not a question of these physical eyes being blind or not blind. It's not what this is, This is something else. I was thinking today actually about our Gurudev, how, such a great saint comes into this world, but actually a very tiny number of souls have the fortune to have been able to recognize that, right? So that takes some grace, that takes mercy, that ability to perceive, to recognize the great souls, right? That requires, you have to be allowed, right? You were making that point the other day, right? You have to be allowed to recognize them. They'll only let you recognize them, if they give you permission to do so. And if anything, they're going to be trying to evade you. There's this principle we hear about sometimes, how sometimes there are certain pastimes or incidents that take place in the case of the Lord or the saints, which will this phrase is used as asura moham, means to bewilder the asuras. So like they can be given an excuse to not have faith, in the Lord or in the devotees, right? Like there will be some appearance of something that is, very commonplace or even immoral, right? So as to bewilder people, to turn them away, right? Or like another example I heard it mentioned is in the end of Bhagavatam, there's a commentary. I haven't read Bhagavatam myself, actually, but one of my good friends who's a Vaishnava scholar, mentioned how Srimad Bhagavatam actually concludes with, like the 10th canto is going into Krishna Lila, right, in depth, and the 11th canto also has, many important instructions in devotion, right? But then the last section of Bhagavatam, there is a lot of kind of like very general, like generic spiritual, philosophical instruction. It's kind of like it's going down a little, And then there's this explanation, I believe it's given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, saying that this is given to bewilder like the atheist class, then, so they can say, oh, like, they can go make some impersonal. It's like, in the line of impersonalism, that type of instruction. So it's like something to bewilder them, right? It's like a filter system. Bhaktivinoda Thakur also talks about this. Like there's a filter system. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he explains it in this way. It's like in a hospital, you have some segregation where you separate the less diseased patients from the more diseased patients, so as to give the stronger patients a better chance, right? If you just if you lump everybody in together, everybody's going to get sick, right? Everybody's going to get diseased. So if you separate the more diseased, contagious patients, then the ones who are a little healthier, they have a better chance, right? So it's like that. We see this type of system sometimes in place, where the persons of a lower mentality, they'll be distracted. They'll be cleared out the way. So the genuinely faithful, they'll have a better chance. The common mob won't all be mixed in, with the higher class students, like that. So it's an interesting point, right? Krishna's Srila Sridhar Maharaj uses this expression. He's a hypnotist, right? Mystic hypnotist, right? He shows us what he wants to show us. What he wants to show us. So, what is our conclusion? We cannot rely on what we see, what we perceive. We are always trying to take shelter of the vision of higher souls and aspiring for their grace. We cannot rely on our own estimation. We are aspiring to approach that plane ultimately in the spirit of surrender, dedication. Devotion is too high for us. But surrender, we can try to practice that, you know, and devotion may come. Now also, even without visually seeing him in that way, the devotees see Krishna and Brajadam within their hearts, saturated with devotion. The jiva's eyes of devotion are the eyes of his pure spiritual self. Wow. The jiva's eyes of devotion are the eyes of his pure spiritual self. The pure vision of Krishna is attainable in proportion to the degree that those eyes are developed by the cultivation of devotion. When devotion in practice, sadhana bhakti, reaches the budding stage of love, bhav, by the power of Krishna's grace, the unguent that is love is applied to the eyes of that developed devotee. Then he can have the direct darshan of Krishna. The phrase within their hearts means that Krishna is seen in proportion to the degree that his devotee's heart is purified by devotional qualification. Wow. The essential point is that the triple curved form of Shama Sundar, the supreme dancer who plays the flute, is not imaginary. It is seen by the eye of unalloyed consciousness. So just because you can't see him under the lens of your microscope, doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. Just because you can't prove his existence by means of your empiric powers of perception, that doesn't mean that, because he's not existing in the cage of your intellect, the cage of your limited mundane experience, that doesn't mean he doesn't exist. But you can only see him through pure consciousness. It is really common sense, I mean, even to see, some person in this world, like to see some big shot guy, like see a movie star or something, it's not going to be that easy. Why is it when it comes to like the supreme absolute original being, everyone thinks they're going to be able to, like find him in their closet or something, like, or you just, like rub your genie lamp and he pops out, like, come on, like, let's be real here. If he really is there, it's not going to be that easy, right? It's not going to be that easy. Surely he's got lots of more interesting people to meet, more interesting things to do than to come and, teach you the ABCs of spirituality, or help you get that job that you want or whatever it is, right? Oh Lord, will you buy me a Mercedes Benz? Giridhar Prabhu, do you want to lead us in the next verse?
Okay, 39.
That's right, 39.
Ramadi Mur Titistu Kala Yamayana Tastan Nana Varataram Akrod Bhuvaneshu Keen to Krishna Swayam Sambhavat Param Pumamyo Govindam Ati Purusham Tam Aham Bhajami. Translation: The Lord has shown in the world many avatars, such as Rama, by expanding his plenary expansions and expansions of those expansions, anon. And he, Krishna, also came personally. That primeval Lord Govinda I do worship. Report. His expanded descents or avatars as Rama, etc., come down from Vaikuntha, and Krishna himself, along with the Rajdam of Goloka, graciously comes down to appear in this world. The deep purport herein is that Krishna Chaitanya, one with the Supreme Lord Krishna, also accepts his advent in that personal appearance.
So, we do see in Brahma-samhita that there is an agenda, right? The agenda is to establish Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these verses, they are establishing, who is Krishna in relation to so many of the great devas and great personalities that are celebrated throughout the Vedic culture, right? And who is Ramachandra in relation to Krishna? Who is Ganesh in relation to Krishna? Who is Parvati, Shiva, and so on. All of these things are put within proper context. Everyone is placed in relation to Krishna being in the center, right? And so, while many persons may celebrate Ram as the supreme deity, here it's being established Krishna is the supreme deity and Ramachandra is his avatar, right? From Srila Sridhar Maharaj, we hear these phrases, avatar and avatari, right? Avatari means the origin of avatars, right? So Sri Krishna and also Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, non-different from Krishna, they are considered, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna, that original Krishna, he is considered avatari, the source of avatars, the origin of all avatars. And all others, Ramachandra, Vishnu, Nrsimha, and so on, they are avatars. They are coming from that original deity, that original source. So yes, very nice. Anyone have any comments on this or the previous verse before we move on? And welcome to those who came in a little late. Jayadev, Ramananda Prabhu, have our Dr. Dandavad Prabhu. Look who's there, Skylar's there. Good to see you. Haribol. Good to see you. Okay, so we can continue then. Dulal Prabhu, do you want to pick up from verse 41? Is it 41? No, I'm jumping.
40.
40. All right.
Okay. All right. Please forgive any mispronunciation. Yasya prabhato jagadananda koti kotishvashesa vasudadi vibhuti binam tad brahma nishkalam anatam ashesha bhutam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Translation: I worship that primeval Lord Govinda, because his power and effulgence is the source of that which is described in the Upanishads as the non-differentiated Brahman, being distinct from the domain of millions of planets and planes like Earth, etc. It appears as the indivisible, infinite, absolute truth. Looks like Vedic purport of verse 34. Purport. The aggregate universes created by Maya are as a quadrant of the majesty of Govinda, Ekapada Vibhuti. The non-differentiated Brahman is a superior truth to that Mayic quadrant. Brahman is an effulgence situated as the outer wall of the transcendental world, which constitutes Govinda's triquadrantal majesty, Tripada Vibhuti. It is indivisible, that is, without expansion, and therefore it appears as stated in the Upanishads, Ekam eva dvitiyam, as the one without a second. It is an element both infinite and undifferentiated.
Okay, great. So let's take a moment to appreciate how radical this all is, we're all used to this idea, right, that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, but in the Vedic world, this is huge. Like there are lots of sages who are just their jaws are dropping right now. Like this is not an easy thing to swallow. Like literally, in the Bhagavatam, when at a certain point when Shukadeva is describing Krishna Lila, and Krishna is the absolute supreme Lord, there's this whole assembly of sages sitting there in shock and squirming in their seats, like this is a bit too much. So, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, she's made this point that the Vedas, they're actually, for the most part, pointing to Brahman conception, mostly, you know. And you know, and there are different views on that, right? There, you know, there's Mayavad, there's Brahmavad. There are many different variations on belief in this impersonal plane and what our relationship is with it. You know, the Shankara version is a little more insidious, right? That we are God, we are that, you know, and there are others who are more in a mood of worship of that. You know, there are others who just aren't quite sure. It's all a bit hazy, and maybe there's something beyond that, maybe not, we just don't know, right? And you find in the Vedas there are all these very vague statements, you know. And that's because, like, that's already enough for most people in the world. The idea that there's something beyond, there's something higher than ourselves, like, that's enough. Like, people are already dealing with the complexity of their daily lives. Like, that's already complicated enough. Like, why do you want to make my life more complicated? No. It's like, it's just so nice to think, just like, oh, God is a white light. Like, I already got enough on my plate right now. Like, let's keep it simple. There's something bigger than me. There's something out there. Like, there's just this, you know, there's some comfort in the thought of nothingness, right? As an antidote to the complexity of what we go through in our daily lives, right? So, but just because that's comforting for us doesn't mean that that's what it is, right? But the Vedas are dealing with us at our level. So they're keeping it simple. They're keeping it vague. They're kind of like just hinting, they're pointing. So many statements in the Vedas, they're like that, you know, and particularly in the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra, you know, they're describing that supreme being. You know, he has no eyes, but he can see everything. He has no legs, but he can run faster than anyone else. And, you know, very, very vague, you know. And then there are these lines, right? Tat tvam asi, you are that, you know. Aham brahmasmi, you know, I am Brahman, I am spirit, right? And this is, all these statements are like an antidote. They're like a reaction to mundane existence. But that's not the final nature of things. Is that the final existence? Just a reaction to our experience of this world? No. By himself and for himself. Why does it even have anything to do with us in the first place? Like, why does everything have to be relative to our existence? Like, can we graduate now? You know, can we go to high school now, or at least kindergarten? Like, like, how long are we going to stick with, you know, preschool conceptions of divinity, right? So first of all, the idea of like establishing personality as the highest, as supreme, that's already quite a lot for someone to grasp, right? But then, what is the nature of that personality, Krishna? No, he's a bit questionable in his behavior. He's not always abiding by conventional standards of, you know, morality and, you know, proper behavior and so on, right? These are very fine points, right? It's not easy to understand. So this is radical, right? It's been, who is Ramachandra? Ramachandra, he's celebrated as representing he's the paragon of Dharma. Let's put it like that. He represents the acme of Dharma, of morality, you know, what it means to be a perfect human in this world, right? Ramachandra, he fully embodies that. That's the purpose of his descent, actually. He's known as Maryada Purushottam, which indicates he's perfectly upholding the Vedic instruction and Dharma, right? He's showing the example of a perfect human in this world. So that we can, it's relevant to us. Like we have context, it's relevant. But Krishna is not relevant to the human condition. Krishna is wholly beyond this world. We have no bearing upon Krishna. Our little existence has no bearing upon Krishna. His purpose is not relative to our existence or needs in this world, right? And so, we have to find like what's the plane that he's standing on that has nothing to do with our plane, right? And so Srila Maharaj, he has his own standard there, and so Srila Maharaj, he likes to reference Hegel, right? If there's a supreme being, he must possess these two characteristics: by himself and for himself. By himself means he's in his own class. There's no one equal to, superior, than him. He is his own origin. And furthermore, he is for himself, right? He exists for his own purpose, not for our purpose. But everything, he created everything for his own satisfaction. We were discussing this point. This came up last week, right? Why does he do everything that he does? His nature is of self-satisfaction. Makes him feel good. That's it. Makes him happy. He has his own rules, right? And he can break the rules if he wants, because actually everything's his. Everything belongs to him. And if he steals something, that's an appearance. That's an ornamental action. Everything belongs to him. There's no question of him stealing. But it's an ornamental behavior. As Oscar Wilde says, right? All art is quite useless. Krishna's not doing things because there's some utility or, base mundane purpose or need behind them. He's doing them because they're fun. He's doing it because it's fun, because it's beautiful. How do you explain beauty? How do you explain humor, joy? All these things, right? It's a different plane, above the plane of your ordinary cause and effect and calculation and rationale and all these things, right? And human need. This is Krishna Lila. So it is not easy for the common person to appreciate these points. So we're being told, right, Krishna, that Ramachandra, who's celebrated, right, as a perfect example of a human in this world. Krishna's higher than him. Krishna's the origin of him. That Brahman, right, that great supreme light consciousness, which everyone wants to merge into in one way or another. That's just Krishna's effulgence. He's the origin of that. Right? So it's, this is all quite radical. And Brahma-samhita is laying it out. This is how it is. And it's all very clear. Okay, let's go on. Maya hi yasya jagananda shatani sutte Traigunya tadvishaya veda vitayamana Sattva-valambi parasattva vishuddha sattvam Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship that primeval Lord Govinda, the all-good, transcendental, pure existence, whose inferior potency is Maya, of the trimodal nature of Sattva, Raja, and Tamagun, the propagator of that Vedic wisdom which pertains to the world. So I think everyone's familiar with these modes of nature, right? Sattva, the energy of goodness; Raja, passion; Tama, ignorance, and they're under the control of Maya Devi, right? The illusory energy personified. Purport: creation pertains to Rajagun, the mode of passion. Following that is sustenance, which pertains to Sattvagun, the mode of goodness. So creation, maintenance or sustenance, and then dissolution, destruction, pertains to Tamagun, the mode of ignorance. Sattva, that is a mixture of the three gunas, is mundane, whereas the sattva that is unmixed with raja and tamagun is supramundane and the transcendental truth of eternal existence. He whose form abides in that existence, he is Vishuddha Sattva, the pure truth which is devoid of Maya's influence, transcendental to the material world, and devoid of the mundane qualities or gunas. He is spiritual joy personified. Maya is the agent who has propagated the all-regulative Vedic knowledge that pertains to the three gunas, Trigunya Vishayaka Veda. So, this is a point that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, right? That generally the Vedas, they're dealing with there's this famous verse, Trigunya Vishaya Veda, similar to this line here. There's this very beautiful line actually at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is instructing Arjuna, Nishtraigunya Bhavarjuna. So there are these three modes of nature pertaining to this world. And the Vedas are accommodating that, right? People generally have natures which are associated more or less with one of these different modes, or all of them in different degrees, right? And the Vedas are accommodating that, right? Person's desires for so many different attainments, or the opposite, renunciation of attainment, right? The Vedas are accommodating these tendencies in these modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And there are so many sections accommodating these different desires. And in this verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, but you, Arjuna, you stay firm in the plane of nirguna, right? There's a plane beyond these modes of nature, pertaining to our eternal nature as servitors of the Lord, right? And in the mode of dedication. So this is the, don't be pulled, don't be influenced by these. This word guna, it's translated usually as qualities, but another meaning of it is ropes. So these qualities, they're like ropes that bind us in this world in different ways. So you be free, you stand free of these things, stand in the plane of truth, right? Higher eternal truth. So Krishna, so there's sattva, and then there's Shuddha Sattva, right? You hear the phrase Vishuddha Sattva is used. So there's the general plane of goodness, energy of goodness in this world, but that is also contaminated, right? If it's not in connection with our eternal fundamental nature as loving servitors, that is also a contaminated thing. Right. So then there's Shuddha Sattva, means pure goodness. And that is referring to the Nirguna plane, the plane beyond the modes of nature, in connection with our fundamental nature as loving servitors of the Lord. So verse 42. Ananda chinmaya rasatmataya manasu yapraninam pratifalan smaratam upetya lilayitena bhuvanani jayatya jasram govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. He whose divine ecstatic form is reflected in the minds of those who remember him, as he perpetually conquers the world in his play. That primeval Lord Govinda do I adore. Those who remember him refers to persons who, having heard the advices of the true devotees or sadhus, recollect the name, form, quality, and pastimes of that eternal Lord of love, the Cupid of Cupids. Playful Krishna and his abode appears in their hearts. Whatever opulence and sweetness may be found in this world is summarily conquered by that revelation of the pastimes in the holy abode. Wow. Very hopeful expression, isn't it? Whatever opulence, because this can be discouraging sometimes, right? Oh, there's so much that can be enjoyed, so much to be seen and experienced in this world, right? How will my heart ever be attracted to Krishna, right? But when some revelation, some touch of that higher sweetness, higher beauty comes and enters us, touches our heart, then that will overwhelm anything else. That will drown out, anything else. And this is a fundamental point in the teachings of devotion, right? And what distinguishes it from many other paths, right? That it's not about trying to artificially repress anything, right? But as we are cultivating our affinity for the positive side, and and by cultivating the proper mood, and we're inviting that higher beauty, higher sweetness to enter our hearts. In Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he likes to use this phrase, higher taste, right? You don't need to fight to give up a lower taste if there's a higher taste that's coming and pulling you, irresistibly drawing your heart, right? You don't need to fight anymore. Just, go with the sweetness, go with the beauty. There's a higher sweetness here, higher beauty, higher love, higher fulfillment. It's not that, spiritual life is such a drag, right? It's like, oh, it's so hard. You have to renounce everything and can't party anymore and so on. This is a much better party than anything you could experience in this world. So that's what this is. There was this one interview I heard of with Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, and someone asked him, it was some reporter, what's the purpose of life or something like that. And on that occasion, Srila Swami Maharaj, he said, enjoyment. This is the real purpose of life. And he said, but in this material world, we cannot properly enjoy. We cannot fully enjoy. We can only enjoy fully, in Krishna consciousness, in devotion, in dedication. That is true enjoyment. When our whole desire, when our wholehearted, wholesale desire is to make Krishna happy, to make the devotees happy, then happiness comes to us. It's a very curious thing, right? When we give up endeavoring for our own happiness, then happiness comes. When we endeavor for the Lord's happiness, that is actual happiness, because that is our nature. Our nature is to give. We can only experience true fulfillment when we're in that mode of giving, right? And our Gurudev, we heard him a few times make this point that Krishna is happiness. He's the embodiment of happiness. So how can we expect to experience happiness? As our Gurudev said in one occasion, how can we expect to achieve happiness when we have rejected happiness himself? We've rejected the person of happiness. How can we expect? Happiness is a person, right? Happiness has its personified existence in Sri Krishna. So when we come and offer ourselves to him, connect with him, then naturally happiness will come to us. We're approaching happiness itself, happiness, the person, and then we will be happy. And when we experience such a high caliber, such a high level, high grade happiness, any other happiness in this world will become Not just dry, but distasteful. Very unattractive. And Chintamani saying, better to use all that comes to us in Krishna's service than to renounce. And yes, this is the proper process. Utilization, not renunciation. The Srila Sridhar Maharaj comments. It is so perfect, the conception of Krishna conscience. It's so perfect. Holistic, holistic. Oh, Radhana Rupini, I'm sorry. When I saw the rainbow, I thought it must be Chintamani. I'm sorry. Oh, we're happy. It's very nice you're with us, Radhana Rupini. I was missing, I was thinking, I didn't put the link in the chat. I didn't put the update in the chat. And so I thought maybe you missed it, but glad you could make it. And Echoes also joined us, and we have Vilasini Didi joining us from England. Nice to be with you all today. So yes, it's such a wonderful point. Very hopeful. Our Gurudev, he used this phrase, like not to try to repress the senses in a pushing way. He used that word, in a pushing way. But through Shravan and Kirtan, right, through this natural process of hearing and chanting, then the heart will be purified naturally. We don't have to try to force that, try to push for that. But we're depending on mercy, right? We're depending on grace. And we are going on with the practices. We are watering the root. We're watering the plant, and the flower will come. The fruit will come. Well, we have a few more minutes. We could read another verse, or I don't know if anyone else here wants to make some comment. Giridhari Prabhu, any reflections you'd like to share?
I was thinking of something, but I forgot actually. It slipped my mind.
Maybe it will come. Well, maybe I'll just wait. We just read 42, right? Maybe we can read one more verse before we close for today. Quite a few have come in a bit late, so we'll read one more verse. So 43. Golokanamni nijadamni tale chatasya Devi Mahesha Dinama Suteshu Teshu Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitascha Yena Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. First there's Devi Dham, then Mahesh Dham, and above Mahesh Dham is Hari Dham, and above all is his own home, Goloka. He who has ordained the appropriate powers pertaining to each and every one of those abodes, that primeval Lord, Govinda, do I adore. Worship, adore. It's translated differently in different places, if you see in the purport, because the meaning, translation is difficult, but this word bhaja, or bhajan, bhajami, it doesn't translate properly in English. It conveys all these ideas: worship, devotion, service. So in different verses, they translate it differently. Purport: Goloka Dham is the abode situated above all others. Seeing that above, Radhana Rubini saying, I'm always determined to go to your class. Yeah, that's why I was wondering, where's Radhana Rubini? And I was thinking, if she missed it, then it must be my fault in some way. And I'm going to get a message from her later, explaining what happened. I didn't do something. I was worried, I'm in trouble. I appreciate that so much. You're always she's so serious. You know, when Chintamani was away, she was in some anxiety because when Chintamani is here, everything goes very smoothly. You know, with the hosting and the notifications, and when's Chintamani coming back? So let's read this purport. Goloka, and it's such an honor actually, because Radhana Rupini, she's our senior sister, you know, she's disciple of Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, you know. Not many of those great souls left in this world. It's a great privilege and honor. Goloka Dham is the abode situated above all others. Seeing that above from the point of his home grounds. Brahma is describing all the successive realms. First is Devi Dham, which refers to the material world. So Devi here, right, is referring to, you know, Lord Shiva's consort, Durga, right, or Parvati. And the material world is directly under her jurisdiction, you know, her control. So Devi Dham is her abode, the mundane world. In this realm, the 14 planes headed by Satya Loka are situated. Above this is Shiva Dham. And that plane, a portion known as Mahakal Dham, is pervaded with darkness. On the other side of that portion of darkness is the immensely effulgent plane of Sada Shiva Loka. Above that is Haridham, or the spiritual world, Vaikuntha Loka. The power of Devi Dham as Maya's majesty, and the power of Shiva Dham as time and the aggregate of material elements is present in those planes as the power of the hazy aspect, Abbas, of the Lord's plenary expansion, Swamsha, reflected as separated particles, Vibhinamsha. But the power of Haridham is its transcendental majesty, and the power of all sweetness and charm of Goloka is the mainstay of all majesties. All these powers in each of these abodes are ordained by the direct and indirect might of Govinda. Okay, well, I think I'm going to stop there. We can perhaps go into a little more discussion of this purport next week. So that's verse 43. Does anyone here have any final comments or questions or anything at all before we close for today? Good to see you, Echo. Are you in Arizona? Are you in Anu Krishna's house? Oh, she looks like she has to be quiet. Okay. Okay, well, good to see you.
Thank you, Shaka Didi. It's very beautiful, very nice.
Always wonderful to have you with us, Ramananda Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Guru Maharaj, can I say something?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, Param Guru Maharaj say everything is personal. Absolute is a person. So he explained very nicely. He said, Krishna is the emporium of all rasas. So we have to connect. Is emporium of all rasas. Yeah. 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 So thank you. So encouraging. Yeah, it's we are very fortunate. See, we are very unique by mercy of Gurudev and Guru Maharaj. Last night I went with some meeting in ISKCON. Amarendra Prabhu, he is very famous. So we had fun, but this is his line is more sweeter and more exclusive. Yeah. 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 Thanks so much. You put everything in right perspective. I got lost.
Thank you for sharing, Ramananda Prabhu. Always happy to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Dandavat. And Krishnandrani is also here. Turkey. Hey, thank you all so much for your wonderful association and this wonderful journey going through this sacred holy text, Sri Brahma-samhita. Hope you all have a nourishing week in Krishna consciousness, and look forward to seeing you all next time. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai.
Jai.
Yakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri
Jai.
Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj ki Jai. The assembly Jai. Shri Hari Nam Singh. Jai.
Jai.
Jai. War permanent.
Haribo.
Okay.
Vishaka.
That was
Thank you, Dandavat.
that was